Hi folks, welcome to another edition of the Omnist Hour. I'm going to turn the music down a bit. And coming to you from New Digs in Bandung. So I hope the audio quality, video quality is all okay. We're going to continue today with stuff that we were talking about last time. Namely this interesting changing of the guard, as it were, of the first three souls, the Trinity, and what it means for folks in various camps, and what it means for the pursuit of various kinds of what one might call magic, other people might call science, spiritual science, as it were. Okay, so brief recap of where we left things in the last episode. I was telling you that we are basically coming to the end of the seventh day of creation, with these three primary souls involved in the experiment, all basically giving their all in this experiment by incarnating with basically three key roles in what I like to call the Gaia experiment. Recapping what those roles are, the first soul, God, has been incarnating in human form on this planet since I don't know, as long as the experiment has gone on, as long as that whatever the starting point of this whole experiment was. Maybe it started even before the Gaia solar system formed. Could well have started before the Milky Way formed. In fact, the experiment may go all the way back to the Big Bang in terms of God's commitment to it. The basic idea is for the spiritual entities that we think of as souls, or the more powerful of which we might term gods, to learn to create responsibly, to get along better with each other than they were in the purely spiritual realm, which is where everything started, with pure thought. And as I told you in the previous episode, that involved first talking these spiritual creatures into creating a playground for themselves and coming to inhabit avatars within that playground, the physical worlds, and to a final phase of those avatars living under a set of rules, a set of rules for how you go up a level, how you can lose experience or be sent back to boot camp, as it were. Very similar to the experience that we might have in a modern state-of-the-art video game, role-playing video game. As above, so below. Okay, so God's been doing at this for a long time, coming back in various forms, seeing how this whole karma idea was working out, seeing what sort of new ideas had been contributed by the family, whether they were working or not, if they were really far off the rails. We have a great reset of the sorts, like the cataclysm that took the dinosaurs, like the smaller cataclysm that nearly extincted all large life on the planet that ended the last ice age. And there's definitely a demarcation point there where a large portion of humanity died off. Many, many large mammals died off, and it was not as catastrophic an event as previous ones, but it was certainly a major one and could very easily have resulted in the total extinction of the human species if that were the intent of the creators. Okay, so that's God's role, to keep on incarnating, looking at the progress on karma, and working through that process to get back to the highest God level, which presumably he occupied before this whole experiment began. And that's God's skin in the game, to get back to full awareness of being the first of many senior creators. As I've told you, God's not the only one, just the first one who has set up the scheme of rules, spiritual science rules, by which all the creators have to abide if they want to contribute to the prime universe, which is the first physical universe, God's universe. And there are other parallel universes, as I've said. Okay, so let's go on to the two other chief entities in this. The divine feminine, the great goddess, took a role similar, reincarnating in this experiment in a number of forms until she took on the role of basically being the oversoul of the planet itself, and being given the role of imprisoning souls within the planet for their energy to be used, for their powers to be limited and concentrated on making this experiment successful, providing the energy needed to fuel the completion of this experiment. And as such, she has a pretty large role in deciding if the experiment's going south and mega volcano needs to go off, or massive plate shift. However, she has to play in tandem with the other key player, which is the divine masculine. I don't tend to call this person, this soul, the great God. You could think of it that way because, for all intents and purposes, there's no reason to think better or worse of this soul than of the goddess. But this is the first soul that was created after God, has come to identify as male, and generally has the properties of the trickster god, Loki, the devil, maybe, Lucifer. Okay, his role is, at least now, has been to be basically the barrier between this Gaia experiment and the outside universe. Because at some point it was determined that there was too much interference from other species that were outside this bubble of the experiment, trying to influence the results and causing the experiment not to converge, not to work like it was supposed to. And that's the reason why, for many years, for most of our human history, there have been very few visitations from the outside, despite the fact that if you look back in our early history, almost every tribe, civilization mentions that they got help or were ruled at some point by these very, very powerful creatures from the sky, and creatures which bred with Earth species to create more intelligent, more capable species than were here before, and initially created a race of what we might term demigods, not as powerful as the purebred ones from the cosmos, but with powers that we don't enjoy now, which seem to have been diluted or lost due to what? Genetic drift, creative drift, whatever. Okay, so these three souls have been at this for a long time. I think it's important to mention that each of them has a characteristic magic. Okay, and if you look at the magic systems of humanity, there are basically three fundamental ones, and two of them which basically combine to make the third. So the feminine magic is very much concerned around the chakra system of Eastern religion, philosophy, whatever. It's an inward focused magic of generating power through meditation, through channeling, through inspiration from psychoactive plants, through use of plants and herbs and concoctions that magnify those energies. Okay, that's the divine feminine type of magic. There's also the divine male magic, which is associated with the occult, with witches and warlocks and demons and whatever, alchemical processes, and that is the chakra system is sevenfold. There's 7 chakras according to the canon there. The occult system, the divine male system, is 5-fold and basically conforms to the 4 limbs and the head as being kind of the emblem of humanity and our ability to change the world around us through action, through thought, through manipulation of our environment, control of our environment. So, whereas the female magic is inward focused, controlling ourselves and generating energy that can then be received by the environment and act on the environment, the male magic is more of a outward focused, active magic, if you will. Okay, now both those magics are subordinate to the magic of God, the first soul, because without the first soul, the other two, the second and third soul, wouldn't exist. And everything that they do creatively is dependent upon the support of the first soul, who can cut off their energy, cut them off completely, in fact, make them not exist. That's the power of veto that I've talked about. So the creators, the first creator's magic, God's magic, is a combination of the male and female. And you think about it, add 7 plus 5, the 7-fold female magic, the 5-fold male magic, you get 12. 12 is the magic number of God. And this is why 12 is such a very, very special number. And so many numbers, special numbers, are generated from the number 12. This is why there's 12 apostles. This is why there were 12 gods in the pantheon. This is why there were 12 muses. 12 constellations of the zodiac. This is the manifestation of the pattern of God, which is the combination of the divine female and the divine male, being the father of both. Okay, that 12-fold magic is the one that is subordinate to the latest rules of karma. And that those rules have changed. So you could, in the past, call upon different kinds of magic than are available now. Today's magic is, and all magic has been consistent with what the observable laws of the multiverse were at the time. Okay, so basically anyone doing science, real science, scientifically, is investigating and delving into God's magic. And that's why the greatest scientific minds of recent and even old times knew this and associated what they were doing with some kind of a 12-fold stimulus. Okay, let's see now. Where did we want to go from there? Okay, well, how does that affect things now? As I told you, God has awakened. So the experiment is essentially finished. However, that finish doesn't become final until God dies. Because until we actually die from an incarnation, we don't fully integrate everything that happened in that incarnation. Even if you wake up spiritually to a higher level, you don't necessarily get access to all the powers, all the perks that are associated with that level until you actually return to the spirit world in the afterlife. And as I've told you, many people may have a spiritual advancement and never even know it until they die and go back to heaven, the heaven of their assignment, whatever their spiritual guides, counselors of their level and their particular focus draw them to. And then they will have a life review and they'll realize, oh, this is what I learned, this is what I did right, this is what I did wrong. And if you've gained a level spiritually, you'll find yourself in a very different part of heaven than you've been before, with basically knowledge and awareness that is much higher than you experienced before, which really knocks souls' socks off, because you always think, oh man, when I get to heaven, now I know everything, I see everything, I understand everything. And unless you actually are at the God level, the highest God level, you really don't. You're getting only a sliver of the truth, a greater truth, a huge sliver, much more than you had when you were alive, but still a very small sliver. That's why people can go to heaven to reincarnate and have a Christian experience or an Islamic experience or an atheist experience, whatever. And this is all just part of this system, which is karma. It's a multifaceted system of training that includes what access you have to spiritual powers, who gets access to them, when you get access to them, and this all depends on what path you take, what your particular passions and interests are. Some souls are highly creative, others are highly nurturing, others are kind of like a devil's advocate, wanting to challenge everything, wanting to throw a wrench into systems and stress them. And all those souls contribute to creation in their own way. So let's talk about what that means for the average person incarnated right now and what is going on right now. So, as anybody with eyes to see can see, even though the experiment is nearing its completion, it seems like, well, there's a lot of things undone, a lot of things not connecting, a lot of stress and strife and not going the way anybody particularly wants it to. What's happening right now? Okay. So you can envision it as, here's maybe an example, an idea of what you could think of as going on right now. Imagine God finally waking up, being pulling the stopper from a bathtub full of water. Okay, what happens then? The water starts pouring out into this new reality. And as it pours out of the old bathtub environment, there are currents. It can be a very violent thing, depending on how fast the water is flowing, depending on what kind of crap is floating around in the water. The drain may get stopped up for a little bit, pressure builds, and then, it's like God's bathtub taking a shit, after being constipated for a while. I'm sorry, that's the best analogy I can come up with, and sue me for being crass and maybe disgusting, but I think that gives you a good image of what's going on right now. Now, the thing is that, as I told you, what this whole last phase of the experiment is around is the idea of virtual universes and virtual souls. So that basically, going forward, once the experiment is completed and this new pattern of karma, the latest version of karma, overtakes the whole multiverse, which could take, I don't know, billions of years, a big place. And there are still many souls that don't want this new law, that are going to fight it tooth and nail. And those souls kind of fall into two basic camps, which correspond to those two other souls of the first Trinity. Okay, so the camp of the divine male are those that basically like where they fit in the current power structure. Either, in their local community, their nation, their world, their level of spiritual attainment. Wherever they fall, these souls are like, this is pretty good. I like it this way. I don't want to change. And they've resisted change by keeping using the old methods of control and manipulation of their environment. And you only have to read like the stories of especially Greek, to some extent Hindu mythology, to know that gods can be very petty and have agendas and have wars between each other and be, as obnoxious as any person could be, only with a lot more power to do harm, to cause pain and suffering. And there are many, many, many of those souls still at large. And some of them are the old soul gods that got their power before incarnation and have not agreed. Remember, free will gives us a choice. So you have to choose to incarnate. You have to choose to accept a new set of rules. Now, the way that works in practice is when the new rules come around, these souls, whatever, if they're incarnated, say they're the oversoul of a planet, okay, they can keep that planet for as long as they are allowed. And the term limits on how long you can hang on to a soul vehicle are part of what has developed with the idea of karma. Okay, that's why, in the Bible, there are generations of people mentioned in the Bible that live thousands of years. But now, the span of a human lifetime is pretty much limited to about 100 years. Each soul vehicle under karma has sort of a time limit, a term limit, if you will, because it is sort of a political thing. What soul vehicle you occupy, what role in heaven you occupy, comes with a certain amount of power and influence. And rather than allow souls to exert that power and influence for as long as they choose to, no matter what they do, karma provides a way to limit that and provide a mechanism for other souls to overtake them. Say you've been the god of science for eons, and now you're kind of getting in the way of new ideas of science getting done. You're throwing, wrenches in new experiments, killing off key scientists just as they were starting to act upon an idea that they got, an inspiration they got for some new experiment, some new trial of an invention. That's probably not a good thing to do if you're the god of science, because presumably the god of science would want to advance science, would want to, make science better in terms of make it easier to create things that are beautiful and lasting, stable, don't cause undue pain and suffering to souls in their incarnations, etc. It's a very responsible position. And in the hierarchy of science, I'm sure there's a number of lesser gods who think that they could do the task of being the overall god of science, which is, like higher roles in any government, a very administrative position. It's not so much doing the work as writing traffic over the people who are, and basically making sure that everybody's voice gets heard, every new idea gets thoroughly tested before it gets implemented, coordinating between other gods, maybe at the same level, to address their concerns with your particular area of expertise. Okay? So many of these old powers are either stuck or sticking with their current oversoul role in incarnation, as maybe the oversoul of a galaxy or of a planet or of a particular species. And they're going to need to be convinced that they need to incarnate and take their karmic lumps like everybody else. Now, how does that happen? Well, unfortunately, the only way that happens is for all the other souls who want this soul to change, to make their life so miserable in their current incarnation that they decide, you know what, I've had enough of this, I'm going to go ahead and play the game. Peer pressure. When we have free will, peer pressure is what makes us change. And it can be a very dark thing. And that's why the spiritual creation world doesn't allow you to get to those levels of senior creatorship without having learned a thing or two about how to do peer pressure right. There's a fine line between manipulation and coercion, blackmailing, and a persuasion that, convinces, that actually, say, look at this, look at that, look at all this evidence. Don't you see why this is such a good idea yet? What could I do to convince you? You see how persuasion works versus coercion. And we're seeing that, in the human species right now. There are still many souls that are of the mindset that the only way they're going to get what they want is through coercion and oppression, exerting their power over others, either the power of numbers or the power of a few with large amounts of money and influence to get what they want. And these are the souls that are under the influence of the dark side of the divine masculine. These are the ones that are going to have to be persuaded for the karma experiment to spread and take root elsewhere, and for more of the energy of this new system to, I don't know, it caused kind of a snowball effect. If you imagine, you drop a stone in a pond and there's a certain ripple, and then the pond becomes still again, okay? And 10 minutes later, you'd never know that the stone had dropped in the pond. So that's not a permanent creation. That maybe was a change that was tried and it didn't take. In order for karma to take, we've got to create ripples that keep going, keep building, reinforce itself. And that's going to take some time. And the forces that are arrayed against it are pretty formidable, both Earthside and from without. So we talked a little bit about the dark side of the divine masculine. Let's talk about the dark side of the divine feminine. Okay, the feminine energy is around preservation, keeping the status quo, keeping harmony, peace, love, oneness. Okay, and the sort of toxic femininity aspect of this is the folks that are under the influence of forces that basically the divine masculine forces. If you look outside of our culture, our species, and you look to other planets, other galaxies, whatever, these other civilizations that developed outside of the Gaia experiment are largely being led by folks that have not accepted karma. It hasn't spread to their area yet. Doesn't mean they're bad people. And there are some very, very advanced civilizations that have sort of tried in their own way to invent a version of karma that works for them. And there are some that probably it's indistinguishable from what God came up with and was working on in this experiment. And that's a large part of what has attracted so much interest in this planet, our species, among other civilizations around the galaxy, around the multiverse, different dimensions, whatever, is they see what's going on here and they get an idea. Oh, I see where God's going with this. Let's join the team. And so there are some folks that have accepted and even joined this great experiment outside of our planet. Not many, because, as I told you, the divine masculine role in this was isolating this experiment and not allowing the effects of it to get out till it was mature enough, till karma was a sure enough thing, didn't have any bad corollaries to the new law that would be difficult to pull out later. And I don't know. I have a background as a software developer, so if any of you know how software development goes, you know that a lot of times you'll get something in code that seems like a good idea at the time, but later on you realize is very limiting or causes problems. And it's very difficult to remove that stuff after you have a large user base. And this is, one of the classic problems for software companies, software developers. That even applies to hardware development. It's just that hardware changes are even more difficult to make because you've got to ship a new box or something to solve some problems. Software, you can download a new version of firmware or whatever, or download a new app that gets you around a problem. Okay, this is very similar to how spiritual technologies work. And, this is why ideas like karma have to go through literally billions of years of testing to perfect. And, that's just the nature of the beast. Being a senior creator requires a lot of patience. And this is all part and parcel of why karma exists and why you need to reincarnate so many times and see lessons from so many different points of view before you're really ready to take on the role of a senior creator. And I think, if you look around at the creations of human technology and see the dark side of what's been created through lack of foresight or not really appreciating both the positive and negative uses of new ideas, you'll agree with me that humanity has stepped in a lot of doo-doo with the things they've invented, none more so than the invention of social media, which is causing problems that are multi-generational and will only be seeing the full extent of, as generations of kids grow up never having had an experience that wasn't part of a social engineering experiment of a big tech company. And God can't afford to do that. I mean, maybe that was what happened early in the history of the multiverse, but we wouldn't be around here today if the creator had been as short-sighted as some of our human creators now. And that's exactly why we're going through this phase. We're learning all this, why we have so much pain and angst, and these are the growing pains of souls that are learning how to be creators. Now, basically, there are three kind of groups that souls will fall into in all this. Okay? There are some souls that will gravitate towards, I don't care about creation. I just want everything to be easy, stable, harmonious. I don't care if somebody tells me what to do all the time. I don't care if I even have free will, as long as I have a safe, comfortable incarnation every time. This is folks that really, just exude the divine feminine. And those folks, when the divine feminine lets go of her incarnation as Gaia and decides to say, okay, I'm going to start playing by the rules. Somebody else can come be the embodiment of Earth, and I'm going to go now start incarnating again and take a human form or whatever form and work my way through karma again. Then that will be essentially the point at which this divine feminine goddess will have reached the awakening point that God has. Okay, so she's still kind of sleeping in maybe a God level, but not the full awareness of her role in this. And as such, often working at cross purposes with God, not really understanding her Father. And there's a lot of energy still in her camp. Many people who are basically gravitating towards this idea of cosmic oneness, which is essentially, if you want to abdicate the independence of your soul, if you want to abdicate your free will to a larger soul entity, collective, that is your choice. And those that choose that way, that path, will eventually not really be very welcome in God's universe. God's universe is about growing and extending creation, making new ideas, testing new ideas, and promoting them to the rest of the multiverse in a healthy, controlled way that doesn't cause problems, that doesn't slow down creation, that doesn't destroy creation, that creates an environment for new souls to grow and thrive and develop into senior creators or develop into senior positions all over the multiverse, which some positions are creative, others are more maintenance. Okay, so the divine feminine will have her own universe when she fully wakes up. And that universe will be a place where basically folks want to develop in an environment that is geared towards stability and peace and love and harmony, all these things that the unconditional love crowd likes to tout and likes to imagine could be the truth for everyone. Well, that's not what everyone wants. So if you want something like that, you don't belong in God's universe, because God's universe is a pot of ideas, a fermenting area of new ideas, a testing ground. And there is going to be a lot of, and always will be, a lot of turmoil in God's universe as new ideas are tested and either succeed or fail or are modified. If you want to have this peace, love, harmony stuff, you can go off to this other universe and you can incarnate there forever until you get tired of being told what to think, what to do, where you fit in. Maybe you'll never get tired of that. I mean, some people are happy being part of a hive colony, as long as their hive isn't challenged by another hive, another species. I imagine bees and ants are very happy with their hive, with their queen, with their very rigid hierarchy, and with very limited ability of the individual to affect their life. There's a place for you, but it's not in God's universe. And this is something that I'm trying to tell folks, human incarnated souls, because if you're not aware of this, you might get attracted to one of these other universes where, you know, it may seem like what I wanted, but gosh, this is very repressive. I don't like being under the boot of an authoritarian system. And the divine feminine is one kind of authoritarianism, I would say kind of a nanny state point of view, where you turn over your happiness, the definition of happiness, to another soul and accept, oh, do my thinking for me, tell me what to do, when to do, how to be happy, how, if I'm happy, and I'll just, you know, kind of be a spiritual vegetable. And there are many people who are perfectly happy being a spiritual vegetable. Incarnation after incarnation. They don't want to advance. They just want to exist, be, fine. But you should know that you're going to do it in a different universe. You're not going to do it in God's universe. Just don't have any use for folks like you. Because the downside is that in God's universe, you've also got representatives of the dark side of spirituality, the divine male dark side. These are souls that want to, they're creative, they're ambitious, but they're unprincipled, and they will take advantage of others. And when they are in the same universe as the peace, love, harmony sheep, they will use them and abuse them and get them to basically be their useful idiots to push their authoritarian agenda over that of responsible creators. And this is exactly what we're seeing right now with the pandemic, that you've got a bunch of dark souls who have let their ambitions and their desire for power and fame and money put them in a very dark place of supporting things that they know are wrong, of spreading information that is not true, not factual, not the full truth at least. And whether that's, I mean, you can rationalize, well, this is, and it's easy to do in a corporate setting. So I'm not faulting people that are going along with this. It's easy in a corporate setting to just say, well, that's what the company says, and I'm just an expert in this little area. And yeah, something looks kind of strange and funny to me, but I'm not going to rock the boat because this is my paycheck, and my family depends on it, and my kids depend on it, and you know, there are all sorts of ways to rationalize going along with evil. I'm not going to point any fingers at who is really evil in all this, but I think it's going to become more and more apparent that there is evil at work, and that evil leads all the way up to souls who are opposed to the spread of karma, who are opposed to finishing this experiment. Now, maybe they know that God has woken up and the experiment is essentially done and it's going to be spreading no matter what, but they're hell-bent on slowing it down. Because it could take thousands of years just on this planet to get all of the souls that need to sign up to this and reincarnate. And let somebody else take their place within the framework of the new laws and subject to the new laws. And these souls that are refusing to reincarnate may be hiding right among us. And they are using these old magic systems, which I told you about, as a tool to maintain their power, to maintain their longevity in power. And there are a lot of weird things going on associated with that, because they're living within an old set of rules which they know will die if the spiritual entities that are feeding them effectively die and reincarnate, because that's when they have to start obeying the new rule, because it's been officially passed within the Gaia boundaries, as it were. So, you know, things are not going to get better real quick, and they could look like they're getting a lot worse, especially if you don't really understand what a soul is, and you're stuck in this idea that this life is all I'm going to get, and I've got to go for the gusto, and you're afraid of death. Those who are afraid of death, who haven't understood that their soul is immortal and will go on, those who are afraid of loss, afraid, oh, well, if I die, I'm not going to have these other souls in my life to control and make me feel good and give me this sense of belonging. I'm going to have to go start all that again. I don't want to do that. This is attachment. Attachment isn't a bad thing, but it is what holds you back from moving on to another life. And if you review the near-death experiences people have, you know that there are a lot of times where you are set up to die and you choose to come back. Even though it means a lifetime in a wheelchair, even though it means much pain and hardship, healing from whatever should have killed you, yeah. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing necessarily, and it is all a matter of choice. But as long as there are dark forces within God's universe that are working against, and these are dark forces both from the female and the male side, just different emphasis of what this darkness is. As long as they cling to life in God's universe and don't reincarnate, they are going to be a source of the old style pain and suffering that happened. Because once you sign up to karma, the latest version, you sign up to the fact that everybody has a timeout universe. They may not be aware of it. You won't be aware of it until you hit the God levels and you realize, oh, when I do something that is counter to God's, when I try to screw up a major experiment of some senior creators, I have this weird popping out experience, the Mandela effect experience, and I end up in this alternate universe that's the same but different in subtle ways. And when you get to the God levels, you'll finally realize, oh, that's what's happening. And you'll have a choice. I can play in my own universe. I can make my own reality. I can keep on being a total asshole to other souls. If it's in my private universe, I'm not hurting anybody because I'm dealing with virtual souls. And the real souls are either in God's universe or they've chosen to be here with me because they have the same issue or they have the same desire to learn in this dark way that's not consistent with the laws of the multiverse. And that's fine. Absolutely, souls learn more probably from their dark nights of the soul than they do from the enlightening times where they realize, oh, I'm approaching a new spiritual level. So there's not really any criticism to hang out here. It's just a process. And it's going to take time. And it's going to take work. And, to the extent that you want your environment to be the environment that you personally enjoy living in, go for it. Just with the understanding that karma is a real thing. If you create negative karma, if you harm other souls, if you coerce them, if you manipulate them, if you get them to do things that are inconsistent with what they plan to do in this lifetime, when they were planning whatever experiment that they were going to conduct with their incarnation or a group plan, group incarnations, a bigger plan, if you get in the way of other people and are obnoxious, you're going to have to pay for it. How do you pay for it? You're going to have time in these dark universes where, well, like for instance, let's talk about what this divine feminine goddess is going to be up to once she finishes this Gaia experiment. Okay, she's going to be in charge of a universe, maybe even a whole category of universes that are training areas for people to learn the limitations of love, to learn that unconditional love is in some sense toxic, because if you love unconditionally, you don't set boundaries for people. You don't say, don't step over this line or I'm not going to love you anymore. What you do is enable dark behavior. We've all seen it with children, and the same thing happens with souls. Even worse, if reincarnation after reincarnation, you're enabled to do things that are not what a good soul should do, you're going to go further and further down the dark side. When you go down the dark side, you eventually hit the point of no return, where, you know what? Your path is going to be a dark god. What do dark gods do? They teach dark lessons. Their universes become teaching universes for souls that are very similar to them, to show them what's going to happen to them if they keep on that dark path. And some of those souls will stay in the darkness forever and become teachers themselves. And others will at some point have a change of heart and say, you know what, I don't like playing on this team anymore. I want to be on God's team. I want to be a creator that creates something permanent, not just a a lifetime teacher of hard lessons. That's a choice. It's a choice I hope everyone will make eventually, every soul. Because if they do, we won't need these dark training universes anymore. We'll all be able to create full-time, responsibly. And that's the ultimate goal of karma, is to get to the point where the training of souls is refined enough that one or a few incarnations will be enough to learn how to be a senior creator of something. Even if you're the god of mollusks, snails, and you're tasked with making the snail universe the best ever. New species, cutting off old species that are no longer useful as snail soul vehicles, etc. Whatever it takes. There's a godhood for everyone out there. And if you don't choose it, it'll choose you. If you want to be a teacher of hard lessons, go for it. Be as nasty and horrible as you want. Get it over with. You're not going to be bringing it back to God's universe. You're going to be off playing in the weeds after the next incarnation. And that's why I really have to emphasize this is a time of decision, because the rules are changing. If you're a human on this planet today, the next time you die, you will be growing up in a new system. You will not have the same opportunities or choices that you had before when you incarnate. Some of you will be going to a species on the other side of the galaxy, a hive species, very intelligent, high technology, whose leaders have stolen the souls of all their constituents and sit in their comfortable home planet or planets, plotting out where they're sending expeditions, sending multiple expeditions, because they don't give a flying fig about individuals in these cultures. They have their agenda, their species agenda, and they know what they want. And some of these hive species have made deals with other high-level souls. One of the deals that was made somewhere along the line is any soul that they could talk into supporting authoritarianism, participating in mass formation psychosis, which we've had a number of phases of this in the last 100 years, and if you look in our history, there have been times before where there were experiments in mass formation psychosis. Go research the medieval dance craze, where there was a period of, I don't know, one generation where people would just go crazy and start dancing nonstop and even to the point that they would dance themselves to death. That's what mass formation psychosis is. This is a form of mind control. And there are species out there that basically do mind control. They dominate that way. They concentrate the spiritual energies of their whole species and let a few of their leaders make all the decisions for everyone else. And some of you are going to be participating in those species in the future. And that's actually a good thing. Experience as a human, incarnated soul, you're going to be bringing some turmoil to those other species that they haven't had before. As pliant as you may be to the governments of the earth, you're going to be a thorn in the side of those alien hive species. And that's exactly what their senior leadership wanted. That's the deals they made with the senior creators to support, to do their part in participating in the Gaia experiment. That's how we've had just the right influx of the right genetic material to this experiment to generate all the species, to eliminate the species that we didn't want, to have this Gaia experiment come to its fruition. It's been a huge effort, and some folks have participated. Well, and ultimately everyone participates in great things with some sense of personal gain. It's inevitable. The most altruistic person participating in some group activity, some mass plan, has something that they gain from it, even if it's only the feeling of moral superiority that they get from conforming to whatever mass psychosis they're involved in. Anyway, so you're going to have decisions to make, and on the dark side, there's others of you who are very much into playing mind games and control games with folks around you and wanting to be in charge, wanting to control and dominate others. And not many of you are going to be coming back to the human species. You might go find yourself in your next incarnation part of a reptilian species that has an idea they want to conquer the universe for their hierarchy of leaders, cutthroat leaders, their particular galactic mafia, as it were. And we see that in human governments. Those things all happen outside the Earth. And because this experiment is coming to a conclusion, we don't need that here anymore. It's going to persist as long as the forces that are causing this turmoil on this planet continue to persist. For many of them, the lower level ones, it's only going to be one lifetime. When that lifetime is over, if you're low level soul, you're going to reincarnate, and if you're really a dark soul and have done enough things that your karma is really black, you're not coming back to this universe, or if you are coming back to this universe, you're going to be in another part of it, sown as a seed of discord in civilizations that karma needs to conquer next. Now, do you feel used, abused? No, it's all stuff you brought on yourself. And that's why, this segment is about making choices, taking responsibility for your choices. If you don't listen to me, if you don't take this to heart, you can't blame anybody but yourself for where you end up in the next life. And there's not going to be a second chance for everybody. I've known so many people in my time on this planet who have done nothing with their lives but make other people miserable. And maybe you could argue there's some good that comes from that, and pitying these people and enabling them and giving them a chance after chance after chance that they blow. I'm sorry. At some point, you're going to go down the dark path and you're never coming back. And it's your own fault. So choose wisely. There's not long left. Sorry, this one came out as kind of a dark message, but I hope you learned something from it. Again, if you have any questions, comments, feel free to contact me through the channel or on Facebook. Like, share, subscribe, interact any way you like. Again, I'm not doing this to make money. I'm not doing it to get famous. This is not any part of what I am tasked with doing here. I just want to share what I know. If you don't like it, ignore it. Just don't blame me or people like me in your life for what happens when you go to heaven again. It's not going to be the wonderful, incredible experience it was for many people who've had NDEs recently. And you're not going to hear about it because they're not going to be coming back here. The experience you hear about, the NDEs you hear about, are people who actually do come back and tell you something about the other side. And they tend to come back with very positive messages. That's not to say everything is positive and you're always going to get second chances and everybody's going to be all love and light and wonderful. You're just not hearing those stories because those people are going to these other universes, these other parallel universes of training, which one might be tempted to call hell. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that segment. I'll look forward to talking again. If you have any topics you'd like to hear me talk about, I haven't touched on something you're really interested in, be sure to let me know, and I'll be glad to try to cobble together what I think is helpful information on whatever subject that you would like me to talk about. Till next time, this has been the Omnist Hour with Rob Traum. Take care.